The grand ballroom of Atherton House was a universe of shimmering silk and powdered wigs, where the currency was whispered gossip and the constellations were chandeliers dripping with crystal tears. For Lady Alara Vance, it was the night the firmament of her own small world was meant to solidify. She stood beside her father, a man whose smile was as finely practiced as his waistcoat was impeccably tailored, accepting congratulations on her betrothal to Lord Harrington. Each compliment felt like another gilded bar, locking her into a future that was respectable, secure, and entirely devoid of the messy, unpredictable thing the poets called love. Ilara had long ago accepted her lot. Love was a luxury, a flight of fancy for heroines in novels. Her duty was to her family, to the dwindling Vance fortune that her marriage to the solidly wealthy Harrington would restore. She had convinced herself that respect and companionship were a worthy enough foundation for a life. Harrington was handsome, his manners polished to a high sheen, and if his eyes sometimes held a certain calculating vacancy, she told herself it was merely the look of a man concerned with important matters of estate and commerce. She was a practical woman, and this was a practical match. Her cousin Beatrice, a vision in emerald green that made her auburn hair blaze, drifted towards them on a cloud of expensive French perfume. "Dearest Ilara," she cooed, her fan fluttering like a captured bird, "you are the envy of every woman here tonight. To have secured Lord Harrington," such a coup the word secured snagged in Ilara's mind, as if Harrington were a prize stallion at auction. She forced a polite smile. "You are too kind, Beatrice. I am merely fortunate." "Oh, fortune favors the bold, does it not?" Beatrice's eyes, the same shade as her gown, glittered with an emotion Ilara couldn't quite name. It was not admiration. "I must steal him away for a dance. You don't mind, do you, cousin?" Just one before Ilara could reply, Beatrice had laid a proprietary hand on Harrington's arm, her laughter tinkling as she led him towards the swirl of dancers. Ilara watched them go, a small cold knot tightening in her stomach. She had grown up with Beatrice, had endured the 1,000 tiny cuts of her cousin's competitive nature since childhood. Beatrice always had to have the prettier dress, the more attentive suitor, the last word. Ilara had learned to retreat, to find solace in her books and her quiet dignity. Her father patted her hand. "A fine match, Ilara, a very fine match. Our worries are at an end." His relief was so palpable, it was almost a physical presence, a weight pressing down on her shoulders. She could not fail him, she could not fail her family. An hour later, the knot in her stomach had grown into a cold dread. Harrington and Beatrice had not returned from their dance. They were not in the card room, nor were they taking refreshments. A prickle of unease, sharp and insistent, traced its way up her spine. She excused herself from a tedious conversation about crop rotation, murmuring a need for fresh air. The French doors to the terrace stood open, spilling cool night air into the overheated ballroom. Ilara stepped out, the sudden quiet a balm after the cacophony within. The terrace was deserted, save for the marble statues of nymphs and satyrs that stood sentinel in the moonlight. She walked towards the far end, where a stone balustrade overlooked the sprawling manicured gardens. The scent of night-blooming jasmine hung heavy in the air, a sweetness that felt suddenly cloying. And then she heard it, a low murmur of voices from the shadows of a recessed alcove, almost hidden by a thick curtain of ivy. One voice was Beatrice's, husky and intimate. The other was Harrington's. Ilara froze, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. She should turn back. She should walk away and pretend she had heard nothing. It was the dignified, the proper thing to do. But her feet, as if disconnected from her will, took a silent step closer. "Cannot continue like this, James," Beatrice was saying, her voice stripped of its ballroom tinkle. It was raw, pleading. "To see you stand with her, to hear them congratulate her, it is a torment." "Patience, my love." Harrington's voice was a low caress, a tone he had never once used with Ilara. "The arrangement is nearly complete. Her father's lands will adjoin mine perfectly. Once the papers are signed and the knot is tied, she will be manageable. A quiet, unassuming wife is precisely what I require. She will busy herself with household accounts and leave us to our own devices. A quiet, unassuming wife." The words struck Ilara with the force of a physical blow. She was a convenience, a set of adjoining lands, a manageable placeholder. "But I want to be your wife," Beatrice whispered, and the sound was thick with unshed tears. "It should be me, and it will be you, in all the ways that matter," he soothed. "She is a means to an end, Beatrice. A plain, dutiful little sparrow. You are the fire. You are the one I desire. Come, let me show you." The silence that followed was broken by a soft sigh, the rustle of silk against stone. Ilara stood, rooted to the spot, a statue of ice in the moonlight. The jasmine-scented air was poison in her lungs. Every polite conversation, every shared glance, Every chaste touch of his hand on hers replayed in her mind, now tainted with the sickening truth. Her entire future, the respectable, secure prison she had resigned herself to, was a lie built on a foundation of contempt. She was not even a pawn in their game. She was the chessboard itself, a thing to be played upon and discarded. Humiliation, hot and sharp, burned through the ice. It was followed by a wave of white-hot fury that was utterly foreign to her. She had been played for a fool, her dignity shredded, her family's honor treated as a commodity. She turned, her movements stiff, her vision blurred by a sheen of unshed tears. She would not cry. Not here. She re-entered the ballroom, the light and noise of physical assault, the smiling faces, the swirling dancers. They all seemed grotesque, part of an elaborate mockery at her expense. She had to get away. She had to find her father and leave this place before she shattered completely. As she moved through the crowd, a single figure detached itself from the periphery. He was a man who seemed to absorb the light around him, dressed in stark, unforgiving black that stood out against the peacock finery of the other guests. Alistair, the Duke of Blackwood, a man spoken of only in whispers, immensely powerful, impossibly wealthy, and famously reclusive since the tragic death of his wife years ago. He was a creature of myth and shadow, rarely seen in London society, and his presence here tonight was the subject of much speculation. His eyes, the color of a winter storm, met hers across the room. There was no pity in them, no curiosity, only a startling, unnerving perception. It was as if he could see the precise shape of her ruin, the jagged edges of her broken pride. For a moment she was paralyzed by that gaze, feeling utterly exposed. She tore her eyes away and hastened her steps, her only thought to escape, but her path was suddenly blocked. Harrington and Beatrice had returned, their faces flushed, their eyes alight with a shared, secret triumph. Beatrice saw her first. A flicker of panic crossed her features, quickly masked by a triumphant smirk. "Ilara, there you are! We were just coming to find you." Harrington took Ilara's arm, his touch now feeling like a brand. "My dear, you look pale. Is the heat of the room too much for you?" The lie, so smooth, so practiced, was the final straw. The fury inside her broke its bonds. "Remove your hand, my lord," she said, her voice low and trembling, yet carrying with a chilling clarity in the small bubble of silence that had fallen around them. Harrington's smile faltered. "Ilara, what is the meaning of this?" "The meaning," she said, pulling her arm from his grasp, "is that our engagement is at an end. I find I have no desire to be a manageable, quiet, unassuming wife who exists merely to connect your lands." The color drained from his face. Beatrice gasped, her hand flying to her throat. The whispers around them ignited, spreading through the ballroom like wildfire. Her father was pushing his way through the crowd, his face a mask of confusion and alarm. "You are overwrought," Harrington hissed, his eyes darting around at the avid faces. "You don't know what you are saying." "Oh, I know precisely what I am saying," Ilara replied, her voice gaining strength. "And I know what I heard. On the terrace. I wish you and my cousin joy of each other. You are well matched." The scandal was absolute, a public jilting, an accusation of an affair between a man and his fiancée's cousin. It was a catastrophe. Ilara could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes on her, dissecting her, judging her. She had saved her honor, but in doing so she had detonated her future and her family's. She saw the devastation on her father's face, the dawning horror as he understood the implications. Ruin. They were ruined, just as the weight of it all threatened to crush her. A voice, deep and resonant, cut through the din. "A wise decision, my lady." Every head turned. The Duke of Blackwood had moved to her side, his presence so commanding that it imposed an immediate silence. He was taller than she had realized. A monolith of black wool and stark angles. He looked not at the gawking crowd, but at her. "A woman of your character," the Duke continued, his voice calm and deliberate, "deserves a man who recognizes her worth, not a feckless boy who mistakes integrity for plainness." He then turned his glacial gaze upon Harrington, who visibly shrank. "You, sir, have made a grave error in judgment. You have insulted not only this lady, but all who value honor." The Duke's gaze swept the room, a silent dismissal of every gossip and opportunist present. Then he did the unthinkable. He turned back to Ilara, who stood trembling in the eye of the storm he had created. He offered a small, almost imperceptible bow. "Lady Ilara Vance," he said, his voice ringing with authority, "since your dance card appears to have an unexpected opening, might I be so bold as to petition for it? And indeed, for all the dance cards of your future. Will you do me the profound honor of becoming my wife?" The collective gasp of the entire ballroom was a physical force. Time seemed to stop. Her father stared, his mouth agape. Beatrice's face was a grotesque mask of disbelief and fury. Harrington looked as if he had been struck by lightning, and Ilara looked into the stormy eyes of the Duke of Blackwood and saw not a lifeline, but an entirely different, deeper, and more terrifying ocean. He was not saving her, he was annexing her. But what choice did she have? The ruin Harrington had planned for her was one of humiliation and quiet desperation. The ruin she had chosen for herself was public and absolute. The Duke was offering a third path, a gilded cage, perhaps, but one that offered protection from the wolves. Her voice was a whisper, but in the profound silence it sounded like a shout. "Yes, Your Grace, I will." The Duke of Blackwood's study was as stark and uncompromising as the man himself. It was a room of dark wood, leather-bound books arranged with military precision, and a single vast window that looked out not upon manicured lawns, but upon a wild, wind-swept moor that stretched to a bruised purple horizon. The air was cool, scented with old paper and beeswax, and utterly silent. It was here, 2 days after the cataclysmic events at the Atherton ball, that the terms of her new life were laid out. Ilara sat in a severe, high-backed chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap to still their trembling. The Duke, Alistair, he had instructed her to call him in private, though the name felt foreign and heavy on her tongue, had not joined her on the journey from London to his ancestral home of Blackwood Manor. He had followed a day later, leaving her to travel with a silent, grim-faced chaperone and to arrive as a stranger in what was to be her new home. He stood by the window, a tall, dark silhouette against the fading light. He had not offered her tea, nor had he engaged in any of the pleasantries that might soften the edges of their bizarre situation. He had simply begun to speak. "I believe in clarity, Lady Ilara," he said, his voice devoid of any emotion. "It prevents misunderstandings. Our marriage is a contract, a partnership of mutual convenience. I require a duchess. You require a shield from the social oblivion you so narrowly escaped." She flinched at his bluntness, but did not look away. She had spent the last 2 days in a state of suspended shock, and his cold pragmatism was, in a strange way, a grounding force. "My household has been without a mistress for 5 years," he continued, his gaze fixed on the darkening moors. "It requires order, direction. The staff is capable, but they need a firm hand. The social obligations of my station, which I have long neglected, must be attended to. You will be responsible for these things. In return, you will have the protection of my name, a generous allowance, and complete dominion over the domestic running of this estate." It sounded like an interview for a position as a highly paid housekeeper, a duchess in name only. Her heart, which had been aflutter with a strange mix of terror and a bizarre, nascent hope, settled into a dull, heavy rhythm. This was no fairy tale rescue. It was a business transaction. "I understand, Your Grace," she murmured. He turned from the window then, and his eyes, those piercing grey eyes, finally met hers. "There is one further term, the most important one. My daughter, Liliana." Ilara's breath caught. She knew, of course, that he had a child from his first marriage, but the girl was spoken of as little as the Duke himself, a ghost within a ghost story. "Lily is delicate," he said, and for the first time a flicker of something unreadable crossed his face. It was not warmth, but perhaps the shadow of a long-forgotten pain. "She is 5 years old. She does not speak." The words hung in the silent room. "She does not speak." Ilara's mind raced. Was the child ill, frightened? A terrible cold pity washed over her for a little girl she had never met, growing up in this silent, imposing house with a father made of granite. "Your role as her stepmother will be largely ceremonial," the Duke stated, his voice once again a flat, hard surface. "You will ensure she is well cared for, that her governess has all she requires, but you will not attempt to intrude. Her world is small and quiet. I will not have it disturbed by misplaced sentimentality. Is that understood?" The cruelty of it, the cold dismissal of a child's needs, pricked at Ilara's conscience. Do not intrude. Misplaced sentimentality. He was building a wall not just around himself, but around his own daughter. Yet, what right did she have to protest? She was a stranger here, a signatory to a contract. To object would be to overstep the very clear boundaries he had just drawn. "Perfectly, Your Grace," she said, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "Good." He seemed to consider the matter closed. He moved to his desk, a massive block of dark mahogany that dominated the room. "We will be married by special license at the end of the week. A small private ceremony in the chapel here at the manor. I have already sent for your father. He will be permitted to attend. After that, he will return to London. Your connection to your former life is, for all intents and purposes, severed." Another blow. She would not even have the comfort of her family nearby. She was to be an island, just as he was. "As for the other matter," he said, his tone dismissive, "the cause of our arrangement, I have purchased Lord Harrington's debts. He and your cousin will find society in the Americas more to their liking. They will not trouble you again. It was done with such casual, ruthless efficiency. He had not just shielded her. He had erased her tormentors from her world with a stroke of a pen. The power he wielded was immense and terrifying. She should have felt gratitude, relief. Instead, she felt a profound sense of her own powerlessness. She had traded one cage for another, infinitely larger and more opulent, but a cage nonetheless. "Thank you, Your Grace," she managed to say. He gave a slight dismissive nod. "That will be all. Mrs. Davies, the housekeeper, will show you to your rooms. They are in the east wing. My own are in the north. We will maintain separate quarters, the final term, the final brick in the wall between them. Theirs would not be a marriage in any true sense of the word." Mrs. Davies, a woman with a face as starched and unyielding as her apron, led Ilara through a labyrinth of silent, echoing corridors. Portraits of grim-faced ancestors watched her pass, their painted eyes seeming to judge her. The house was immaculate, polished to a gleam, but it was utterly devoid of life. There were no stray books, no forgotten shawls, no scent of baking from the kitchens. It was a museum, not a home. Her apartments were luxurious, a suite of rooms decorated in shades of cream and pale blue, with a roaring fire already laid in the hearth, but they felt cold, impersonal. From her window she could see a vast walled garden, choked with weeds and tangled overgrown rose bushes. It was a place of forgotten beauty, a testament to long neglect. A shiver went through her. The garden felt like a mirror to the house itself, and perhaps to the heart of its master. The next few days passed in a blur of cold formality. She met her father in a stilted chaperoned meeting where he wept with relief, thanking the Duke for saving them from ruin, never once asking if she was happy. She was fitted for a wedding gown of severe, elegant ivory silk, and she caught her first glimpse of the child, Liliana. It was from her window, a small figure in a dark coat standing with her governess on the edge of the wild lawn that bordered the moor. The girl was unnaturally still, her head bowed, her pale hair hidden beneath a bonnet. She did not run or play, she simply stood, a tiny, lonely statue against the vast, bleak landscape. The sight caused a painful ache in Ilara's chest, a deep, instinctual pull of compassion that she was explicitly forbidden to act upon. The wedding day dawned grey and overcast, the sky a seamless blanket of bruised cloud. The chapel was small, cold, and smelled of stone, dust, and damp. The only attendees were her father, a grim-faced solicitor, and the vicar whose voice trembled slightly in the Duke's formidable presence. Alistair stood at the altar, a figure carved from shadow. He spoke his vows in a clear, steady voice, his words echoing in the stone silence. When it was her turn, Ilara's voice was a whisper, but she did not falter. She made her promises to this stranger, this cold, remote man who was now her husband. When he placed the ring on her finger, his skin was cool to the touch. It was a simple band of gold, heavy and definitive. There was no kiss. He simply took her arm, his grip firm and impersonal, and led his new duchess out of the chapel. As they stepped outside, a fine misting rain began to fall. Clinging to her hair and face like a veil of tears she would not allow herself to shed. She was the Duchess of Blackwood. She had a title, a home, security. She had everything a woman was supposed to want, and she had never in her entire life felt so utterly and complete.